Good morning, this is Mission Alive and I'm Greg McCann. This is part 7 of a series we're doing on the MSC involvement in China. We talked about going to Shenzhen, which is in the middle of southwest China. We talked about the bandits. We talked about the Paris Missionary Society priests who were there prior to our arrival. They had actually been there for many years, arriving in 1870. That's their seminary you can see there, but we'll come back to that later on. We talked about the trip up the Yangtze River. We talked about Barney Delaney's articles in the Australian Province newsletter. And we talked about the Long March and how it involved Shenzhen. Of all the places to go through it, one place that was stopped was a Shenzhen. Then we looked at 1938 and the wonderful great men who were there at the time, the MSC from the North German province, and the sisters who had the orphanage. They had a dispensary, they had schools. Once the sisters arrived, the mission really went ahead in leaps and bounds. We looked at the church, that's Tongren Church, Dejiang Church, and that's the main altar of Shenzhen Church with Christ the King. Then we looked at how it was made a prefecture and how the mission had grown by the late 30s and how those times were the heady days of success, the pinnacle of achievement for the mission. During World War II, Japan did not invade Guizhou province, as I said, and except for the communists, the missionaries were virtually left alone. On one occasion, the 6 missionaries were abducted and spent 6 months in jail, but eventually they were released. We got to a stage with this period of calm we talk about. I called it a confused peace descended on the mission, and how Japan did not invade or did not come into Guizhou province, and how the roads and the railways were starting to become important parts of the infrastructure. This also improved communication, and as Monsignor Volkholz was installed as the new prefect apostolic, it became a time of expansion and great progress. 1938, 39, 40. During the war years. In spite of a lack of money, many churches and the presbyteries were built. The missionaries sold their building skills, dispensed medicines and taught weaving and sewing. There were some public officials who discriminated against them, and they tried to close the schools, and they impounded harvests and forbade Christians to go to churches. And you know what? It's a bit like that today too. But in general, those war and post-war years were time of great expansion of the mission. I just bring to your attention a couple of the photos. That bridge goes from one tunnel, the bridge, to another tunnel. And also there's a road actually you can see too. So you can either get off the road and go down here. It's awful. It's a terrible place to drive a car. But if you're talking about a place to drive a car, I've been on this road. At night in fog. And it's a terrible place to be, I can tell you. That's the road between Tongren and Shenzhen. I travelled that road many times. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Anyway, that's where we're at now. The mission's final years. So as I said, The post-war years were times of construction, and 6 new churches were built by the missionaries using mud bricks. The Germans were very good at making their mud bricks, and you can see by the fact that the church is even standing today how good their workmanship was. In 1947, Monsignor Buchholz opened many catechetical centres and schools, as well as a minor seminary. And there were 25 students from Shutian who were in the major seminary, the one that was run by the Parish Missionary Society in Guyana. 3 were ordained in 1948, but by this time the communists had inundated the whole area and occupied all the principal towns. They had defeated Chiang Kai-shek, who was now pushed into Taiwan, and the whole country now was under communist rule. In 1951 it was evident that things were going to get much worse in the future. The missionaries were forced to pay levies and taxes. They were reduced to sewing, weaving and dispensing medicine in order to survive. Some became sick and were evacuated. Monsignor Buchholz, 7 priests, 2 brothers were expelled in 1952. By that time, as I said, the Communist Party had complete control of China, and the People's Republic of China had been established in 1949. When the priests and brothers and sisters were gone, the church building Shutian was converted to a wheat storage area. You can see by the photo. It was a time when the Catholic Church in China had 3 alternatives. Join the Patriotic Association, which was established in 1957 by the government. Continue to function as an affiliated church with Rome and take the consequences, or go underground with religious services held secretly and in private, essentially under the umbrella of the Legion of Mary. That's the beginning of this presentation. We begin next day with part 2 and how the mission continued.